Jeff, I could go first if nobody else wants to, and people can build on it. Is
Please.
that okay? Can you hear me
Absolutely.
okay?
Go for it.
I think it's true. Everybody is talking about housing affordability and housing equity. There's been an Arlington Fights Racism effort that is not specifically tied into housing, but totally dovetails with what people are seeing, which is Metro Boston area prices are very high relative to incomes or pensions, whatever you call it. And I used to think that I was in the camp of people, because I grew up here 40, 50 years ago, that just wanted to keep Arlington nice, meaning green lawns, if you have them, or a little bit of public space in an apartment building that people could use, and streets that were safe for kids to walk on, or a downtown area you could walk to. But I realized, and I think the AFR people have agreed, that keeping Arlington affordable, meaning allowing it to be a place that people can stay in as they age, they can afford to stay, or they can move here if they're from diverse backgrounds or their income isn't the highest, is really critical. And it's so nice to see what people used to call NIMBY actually being repurposed as pro-diversity. So I really hope that the debate we're talking about today doesn't say we need more housing. I fear your group has kind of started in the slides you showed, a more housing, more density group. I hope most of us here would agree we need lower priced housing, and anything that increases housing is bad. If it increases the price, excuse me, if it increases.
Yeah, Jennifer, next.
Yeah, I have a different take on this. So I think we need three things. Think we need affordable housing. I don't think we've done our part in the region for adding affordable housing. We clearly are below our neighboring communities, with few exceptions, frankly. I think we need housing diversity for people at all ages, so they're like a lifestyle sort of, so that you can come in before you have kids, you can downsize after you don't have kids in the school system, and that's what's missing in Arlington. And then I think we need housing supply more generally. And I'm often struck by, I think this becomes a very emotional issue for a lot of people, but the laws of supply and demand really do apply to housing as well as to everything else. And one of the reasons that housing is so expensive is because suburban communities like ours have restricted housing over the last 40 years. And I think that we need to do our part to mitigate some of the harm that we've caused. We don't need to become Cambridge necessarily or Boston. All suburban communities need to do our part to mitigate this issue, the housing affordability issue.
Thank you, Jennifer. Anyone else? And you feel free to comment on what you've heard so far or add new thoughts about what you think the needs are. Winnow.
Thank you, and thanks for getting my name right. I agree that we need more affordable housing, but I think it's so much more difficult to achieve than by simply adding more housing. There is a lot of conflicting research about the best way to create affordable housing. And I think that's a little bit of what Jennifer may be alluding to when she says it gets very emotional. Because if I had to grossly simplify things, I would say most people in Arlington come down on one side or the other. And there are those who believe that the best way to create affordable housing is by simply building more market rate housing. And then the affordable housing will trickle down, if you will, out of that. There's another school of thought that says the way to create affordable housing is to build affordable housing. And there is research to support both stances. These are not simply opinions. These stances have been researched. And I think that, the town is making some progress. You pointed out that in the past 20 years, our inclusionary zoning has only created 62 affordable units, but the 100% affordable housing projects that the town has underway right now are going to create double that in one fell swoop. So, there's, and I think connected to all of this, one of the big problems to me about assuming that market rate development will supply affordable housing is that it puts the burden on private developers. This is a societal need for affordable housing, and it should not be the responsibility of a private developer, I don't think. And I think that's why we run up against this wall, because their cost constraints are real and they are limited in the number of affordable units that they can supply. And we will never achieve adequate affordable housing by assuming that it can come from the private market. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Looks like we've got Wendy next.
Hi. I agree with a lot of what's already been said, and I think that when I think of affordability and development, I think that we have to acknowledge that the land cost in Arlington, because of its proximity to Boston, is high. So then what do you do with that, and how do you create affordable units given the cost of the land? And I think that density is a big issue, and how density is treated. And people have a fear of density. I think that you can increase the number of units without apparent density. It doesn't all need to be high-rise, no open space kind of development. I recently attended a Boston Society of Architects talk about the missing middle, that talked about the 2-family, 3-family, 6-plex, 12-unit, the smaller kind of infill housing that can fit into a neighborhood if you have a lot that could accommodate that. Our zoning does not allow that. I think that zoning often gets in the way of creative solutions to add units of housing without destroying the character of the town. So I think that should be taken into account. I do agree the corridors, that's a place to do increase the density along the corridors makes a lot of sense, but it's like, how can you sort of nook and cranny additional units without changing what the neighborhoods feel like?
Great, thank you, Wendy. Rebecca.
So I'm not sure that I can be seen and heard simultaneously. I'm not even sure I can be heard. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. I can hear you.
I can hear.
Thank you. So I'm aware of the work that the Housing Corporation of Arlington has been doing, which I think has made inroads into providing affordable housing. I'm not aware of the Arlington Housing Authority taking advantage of any of the privileges it has to develop more affordable housing. The Menotomy Manor and potentially even Drake Village are very large lots of land that don't have a sizable amount of housing on them, relatively speaking, to the land area. I don't have any sense that the town is working with, urging the Arlington Housing Authority to help create more affordable housing in Arlington. The other thought that I have is, of course, we now have the Arlington Housing Trust Fund, but we have not really made any inroads in getting it going. There was a preliminary warrant article on how it might be funded, but I'm not even aware that there is a committee yet established to start running it. I feel often that we talk a lot, but we don't get much done very quickly. And I know that these are complicated problems, but it isn't clear to me that there's any urgency beyond the urgency we claim to have when we talk. There's not a lot of urgency in our actions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. And I want to make sure, Wendell, before we let people speak a second time, I want to make sure Mallory, Shafak, and Gina. I know Gina mentioned that you agree with Wendell, you agree with Wendy. But do either of you have any comments you'd like to make before we open it back up to others?
I don't have very much to add. I am a newcomer to Arlington. I've been here for just a couple of years and still getting a feel for what the needs are. I've been to several meetings where I have heard very clearly expressed the need for affordable housing, and it just makes common sense, I think, based on where Arlington is situated, that that would be the case. I agree 100% with what Winell said about not relying on the private sector to create affordable housing and increasing the stock of housing in and of itself without some kind of government oversight to make sure that it's going to the people who need it most, I think is critical, right? Otherwise, there's enough demand by people who are able to afford the skyrocketing prices in Arlington, be it cost to own or cost to rent. I think people who have lower incomes will be pushed out by people who can afford more, and just increasing the stock of housing without paying heed and a lot of thought into how the housing is going to be allocated and used and set aside for people who need it most, I think is critical. And there's, I think, a huge role for the town of Arlington through its various agencies and boards to, I think, to have a role in that. I'm not sure to what extent it can by itself without approval from the state. And obviously there's the zoning issue, which is a huge other problem, or rather an obstacle that will have to be overcome, I think, for most of, I think, the components of a plan to work out. But I think that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Shafak. And I'll just bring up something that Carl mentioned in the comments, that your housing trust fund allows for developers to target that to people making up to 100% of the area median income, which of course makes it more difficult to target to the people who really need it. So it's a good point. Mallory, Gina, do you have anything to add?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good evening. I'm here as the Community Development Block Grant Administrator for the town, so I'm primarily here to listen and learn. In our consolidated plan for CDBG, housing is our top priority need, so it of course is reflective of an overall need in the town. So I appreciate hearing your perspectives on all of this.
Right, so we have about 3 more minutes.
Could I push back a little bit? The notion that was made about zoning is somehow bad for us, because Arlington is actually, I would think, one of the most ideal places in Massachusetts for zoning.
Can you
can I explain what I mean?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So in terms of zoning, if we're talking about trying to make things affordable or trying to make things available to diverse peoples, we're not talking about redline. That's something historically that happened in other places, and I don't even know if it happened in Arlington, but it's historical. What we're talking about is inclusionary means small lots that people can own homes or rent homes on. It means access to transit. It means getting a lot of things that don't prevent people but allow people to want to move there. And Arlington, compared to all the communities around us, is inclusionary in the fact that we're cheaper, except for Medford, to buy or rent in. And we're cheaper than many of the Tony towns to the west of us because our lot sizes are much smaller. And we're actually cheaper than the multifamily and less single-family zone places to the east of us, meaning Somerville and Cambridge. So what zoning can do is it can allow people who might not be able to buy a house in those more expensive towns or a condo in those more expensive towns to allow themselves to move to a cheaper place like Arlington, relatively cheaper. I know we're not cheap. And it allows them also to have good schools, and it allows them to have a little bit of green space, whether it's public or private. If you look at the Somerville world where I came from, many of us might have come from Cambridge or Somerville, you don't get much space there. You usually get pretty bad schools unless you do special things. And the cost of living is incredibly high. We should protect what we have. Ms. Susie is right that Arlington is in a supply situation, but she's not entirely right about the fact that if we just add housing, it all somehow gets cheaper. In fact, Arlington is in a bubble of cheaper housing. We should try to resist building housing to area prices.
All right, well, we are about to be moved into our second group that will happen automatically. Oh, here we go. So enjoy your second round. Thank you, everyone.
Welcome, Shafak. Welcome to Arlington.
Okay, here we go. Jeff, should I go back out? Can you?
Yes, Lena. Or you know what? Let me. Do you have Alexis's cell phone number?
Yes,
Okay. Yeah. Text her and let her know that.
we're both in the same room.
Right.
Okay.
In the meantime, hello again. Actually, we've got some a few familiar faces from my last group, so welcome back. My name again is Jeff Davis with the Horsley Witten Group, and I don't know how you did in your last group, but how I've decided to handle my oh, dang, there goes Lena. Good. All right. How I've decided to handle my discussions. We've got 3 questions. I will read them to you. I don't want to put them up on the screen so that we can all see each other's faces. And this is about housing challenges. So I'll read the 3 questions that we provided, but then we'd just like to hear from you generally about what you think the biggest barriers or challenges to actually having more affordable housing in the community are. So the 3 questions we have, just to, again, spur the conversation. Almost all new development in Arlington requires a trade-off. Where physically can Arlington best support new housing development or redevelopment? Again, acknowledging that a number of people feel that we should be turning our existing housing into affordable housing in some way. 2, how should the town prioritize use of its housing trust fund and the housing related portion of its CPA funds? So for example, do you think they should go to nonprofit developers or financing for new construction or purchase of existing buildings to be de-restricted as affordable housing? And third, the current housing production plan acknowledges a lot of these challenges and includes a fairly comprehensive list of ways that we should be changing zoning to tackle them. But there haven't been many changes made over the last 5 years. So just want to get a sense from folks about, you know, these are, you as a community have identified these challenges for a while now. So what do you see as the barriers to implementation? And we're a small enough group that I would just encourage anyone who would like to speak up to just raise your hand or unmute yourself and share your thoughts, again, about these things or any other challenges related to affordable housing. Jennifer.
So I've said to others, I feel like there aren't a lot of tools in our toolbox. I think the federal government has not focused on housing, you know, for a bunch of years, and nor has the state. And so the desire to have sort of government step in and help to create affordable housing is a great desire, but there just isn't enough money, isn't enough programs, right? And so people often rely, communities often rely on private developers because there just isn't an option. You know, it would be great if the federal government came in and subsidized affordable housing, but they just aren't doing that. So there's a lot of frustration about the options, but I would love to see our housing, a trust fund focus on providing that kind of a deeper affordability that the private developer sort of projects can't provide. So potentially, you know, an 40B project, which, you know, has up to 80%, they could make it so that those units are more deeply affordable. But and other ways to make things deeply affordable. You had a third question. There was a lot going on there. I wasn't sure, but you know, it's really, really hard to create affordable housing, right? The economics are really, really difficult. When we have government input into this, the project is easier. Without that, it's much, much harder. And so we just have to be realistic about our challenges.
Thank you, Jennifer. Any responses to that? Or Robin Bergman, your hand is up, please.
Yeah, so I missed the first question, unfortunately, so I don't know what it was, but you can tell me in a second. But speaking to the trust fund, I'd like to see the trust fund buy buildings and make them affordable and not think about trying to make money off them. I feel that we do have to think about it not in terms of profiting and private development. And I know that's hard, but I think that's the direction we're going to need to go, because we have limited space, we have limited ability to build units, and to build enough truly affordable units, we're also going to really have to up the numbers. I mean, just building one every 6 is just impossible. We're never going to get there. What was the first question, by the way?
Yes. So we're saying if we were to, if the community were to develop new housing, I mean, obviously, I know based on your last comment, you would like to prioritize existing buildings. But if new development is to occur, where do you think it physically should occur?
Yeah, that's a tough one because we have so little space.
Yep.
Jeff, I have some thoughts on this. Could I answer on that subject?
Yes, please, Carl.
So there was a recent article in town meeting to try and keep residential out of industrial zones. And a person might normally think, well, hey, why don't we build housing in our industrial zones? This is like the MIRAC parking lots and some of those buildings between Mass Ave and the bike path traditionally. The problem is that towns like ours, and I should say we have Mr. Benson here, an August member of the ARB, so he'll also, I'm sure, comment. But when you, in a residential community like Arlington or any of the cities and towns around, reduce your industrial, your retail, your business tax base, the cost is generally increased on the residential owners and renters. And so we should do everything possible to increase housing, although it's to be noted that we're the second most dense town in all of Massachusetts, and we're the 11th most dense community. So we've already done our job to be dense for these things. But still, if we're going to increase housing, I would argue, I don't know where to put it because we're already the second densest town, but you should certainly not allow the erosion of our business tax base. And Arlington used to be like maybe 6%, which is very low compared to the towns around us of business to commercial taxpayers. And over the last 5 to 10 years, we've just been slowly losing that little bit. So we're down close to 5 or maybe below 5% now. Why does it matter? Because the businesses don't use services like residential units do. So we should completely, please, not try to increase taxes and rent by building residential in business districts. Thanks.
Okay, we've got a lot of hands raised. Thank you so much for that. I think the first one I saw was Eric, then Guillermo, then Eugene.
Thank you.
All right, I'll try to keep this quick. The main obstacles I see are money. Given infinite money, we can make just about anything happen, but we don't have it, so we need to spend wisely what we do have. I do not best know how to spend that money. I don't have a strong opinion on that. Other than that, I see sort of sometimes I see like we don't want to line the pockets of developers, and like sure, I don't think we want to make profit one of our considerations. We shouldn't be looking to profit off housing, but at the same time, like somebody has to build units if units are going to get built, and that's going to involve people with hammers working for somebody who's telling them what to do, who's a developer. So like, I don't see that you can cut them out of that process entirely. Other than that, I don't have a strong opinion about how to use the fund. The other major obstacle I see is getting people used to the idea that things will change. Like in order for there to be enough housing, that's going to change things. Like some people are going to have bigger buildings built next to them. And in fact, I would argue that many people will need to get used to that. Like that there's going to need, and you can't keep everything exactly the same and still get what we need. That just doesn't work. As far as where, I think that that's actually part of, like, I'd much rather see change to zoning, which instead of saying like, okay, we're going to carve out 2 additional blocks and make this multifamily from single family, or make it 3 to 4 multifamily instead of two unit dwellings. I don't want to see that. What I want to see is a change to all single family zoning, which says everything called single family means 80% single family and 20% two family. Everything currently zoned for two family is 70% two family and 20 to 30% 3 to 4 family, so that you don't end up with like, all right, here's the single family Arlington shoved up in one area, and here's the extremely dense Arlington shoved up in another area. That creates, because folks who are going to rent in a 6-family unit are probably in a different economic situation than folks who are going to buy a single family home. So what you're doing is you're creating economic segregation. Like, you are dividing up the town. In an extreme form, what you're doing is making affluent suburbs an affluent sub-suburb and a ghetto. But even in less extreme amounts, you're still carving up in a town in a way which I think is harmful to the fabric of the town, and also limits. You can get a lot more by taking a vast swath of area and making the whole area slightly more dense than you can by like carving off this chunk. And also that spreads out the impact so that any individual person is like, oh, yeah, there's some more big buildings around me, but not a lot. As opposed to saying, okay, you people in this neighborhood, your life is completely different now. That seems more town friendly to spread out the burden among everybody. If it's a burden, I think it can be done well. Anyhow, sorry, I've gone too long.
Thank you very much, Eric. Guillermo, please.
Thank you. I agree with a lot of what Eric said, especially the bit in the end in terms of its distribution. I also liked what Jennifer said regarding 40B and taking on ways we can allow developers to build more deeply affordable units, anticipating that they may want some sort of incentive, some sort of collaboration to get us there. One thing I've noticed when I was living in the city of Somerville was there was a big fight regarding affordable units. And in the end, the biggest issue was a nonprofit developer not being able to pay prevailing wages to afford it and to meet the state guidelines when it was challenged. So the state delegation made sure that it had to be within prevailing wages. So I'm not even going to entertain most nonprofit developers if they can't meet that standard. So I'd rather do something much more ambitious, maybe like find ways for more middle homes. I petitioned for a study for affordable housing overlay. I'm still looking to see the good, the bad, the ugly. I'm looking to talk to anybody about that because I'm not convinced one way or the other, just that it's a good idea, especially given what Eric said, maybe not now, not immediately, but maybe it could eventually serve as that tool to distribute more affordable housing all over as opposed to just a specific area. But I'm open to anything else. I'm just looking to study more. Because in the end, I like to see what's more efficient as opposed to really just throw spaghetti on the wall. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
One of the things that is missed is that
Carl,
every couple
don't
of
mind,
years.
it's Eugene's turn, and then we'll get back to you once we have a chance for everyone to speak. Thank you so much. Eugene?
Thank you. So I've been on the redevelopment board for 4 years and also the representative on the Community Preservation Act for 4 years. So very briefly on CPA, each year we've gotten proposals from either the Housing Corporation of Arlington to create new housing, which to the extent that they've put in proposals, we've recommended and town meeting has approved funding for that, or for the Arlington Housing Authority not to create new housing, but just for maintenance or repair of the existing affordable housing in town, which of course you need to have money to do also, because as Jennifer said, not only is money not available to create new affordable housing, there's not even enough money there for the existing affordable housing. So that's used up, with the exception of 1 year, a lot of the CPA funding that went to housing, and that's not only one. So it sort of seems to me that one option there is to sort of have the town play a more active role in trying to get other developers come in who would propose affordable housing, whether it's sort of inclusionary zoning projects or other sorts of affordable housing projects. You know, the CPA group is just subject to whoever files an application, but I do think, and I hope that one thing that might come out of this housing production plan is something that would incentivize the town to try to get more organizations in applying for CPA money for affordable housing. So that's one thing. On the, why don't we get a lot more built in town? Aside from money would buy a lot and there's not the money there, I think the zoning is really the big reason. If you look back at the town was getting a lot more housing in the 60s and 70s, and it completely put the brakes on that and rezoned, downzoned the town in 1975. So it was the town's intention basically to put the brakes on more housing. And we've pretty much lived with that zoning for more than what, 25, 45 years now. And it's sort of a little crazy to me that we haven't broken out of that early 1970s mindset. Because, you know, I'm not saying the way to do that is to add, you know, is to say we don't have as large an area for single family homes, or whether we deal with the 2-family zones, but we have to look at all pieces of it. And to me, the short-term fixes are to allow more housing to be built where you can have multifamily housing now, but you have to allow greater heights, and you have to allow some other incentives to do that. And if you combine the inclusionary zoning we have now with some density and other bonuses, which is done in lots of other parts of the country, perhaps along with some payments from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, it sort of seems to me we can incentivize developers to either build or build more. And if you build more, you get more affordable housing. The other thing I wish we would look at, and I wish comes out of this study, is can we adjust the percentage? How do we do the bonuses? Because unlike what Carl said, it is completely untrue that every residential unit is a net for taxes. Condos, single bedroom, 2-bedroom, studios tend to be net positive for taxes in town. Not as net positive as commercial, but definitely net positive. The only ones that are net negative tend to be large single family homes where people have a lot of kids. And I'm not against kids, and I think we need that too, and we need to support kids going to school. But what Carl said is basically an urban legend that's not true, not true.
All right.
And there's lots of
We've got about
studies
10
showing.
seconds before we are moved magically into group number 3. Thank you all so much. Maybe I'll see you again in 45 seconds.
Okay.
Am I in a, hi, this is Lori Leahy. I'm
Yes.
wondering, am I in a breakout room now?
You're not. I am about to
Okay.
move everyone in.
Oh, Jeff, I'll just get out.
Hello, everyone.
Okay. There's 10 of us, it looks like.
All right. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
My name is Jeff Davis. I am your facilitator for Breakout 3. And some of you I've seen before, some of you are new. I don't know how your other facilitators have been doing this, but what I've been preferring is, of course, we have another 3 questions for this final breakout. And I just like to read those out to you. And you can feel free to respond to those questions or anything else related to this topic. And this final topic is opportunities for consensus. So how, there are a lot of ideas out there. There are a lot of valid ways that we can approach affordable housing as a community. So what are the ways that we make those decisions collectively? So our 3 sets of questions are, what steps would help to bring community together around the provision of affordable housing? And what do you think most people can agree on today? What might be a foundation for agreement? 2, how can the town balance concerns about housing needs and natural resource protection? And also, how can the town balance concerns about housing need versus preservation of Arlington's built environment? And again, feel free to unmute yourself or a small enough group that if you just raise your hand, we can get a conversation going about any of these things or other ways that we can build consensus in the community.
Jeff, could you put those up so that we could share them and see them again?
Sure. I generally
Your
like.
voice fades in and out, and so I couldn't hear completely sentences.
1 minute. I was just saying I generally like to see everyone's faces, but if you'd like to see this, I would gladly.
I do too. I like to see everyone's faces too.
Of course, depends on how many screens people have and how you're set up. But here are the questions.
Can you lower your notes screen at the bottom so we can see the font a little bigger? Yeah, can you lower that part? Thank you.
Yeah, the first big question is, what do you think is some common ground, things that everyone in the community can say, yeah, I agree, we can at least move forward on this.
Tough one.
Well, I think everybody would agree that we need housing that is affordable, and that the housing prices are just going up and up and up. How to solve that is maybe not in agreement.
I agree with that, Wendy. It doesn't get very deep into even the AMI that people are willing to agree on, but certainly somewhere between 30 and 80% AMI would be something that I think most people could agree on.
Right.
Your thoughts on that? And that's not true for all communities. There are a lot of communities that would like housing to just get more and more expensive. So that's actually a good win if you all agree on that.
I think I agree that everybody wants it to be more affordable, but one of the reasons it's getting so much attention now is that it's affecting everybody in all income brackets. And while I don't think that we should be producing $500,000 houses, I do think I wish there was a way that we could help people, even middle income people, not just low income people. But I guess production is the answer there. But that's something I don't think we agree on.
Nope.
Definitely don't. Do not agree on increased density even.
It was 500,000 supposed to be expensive or cheap?
Right, that's a good question.
I think that is, now I would consider that an affordable middle class home.
Yeah, because I just purchased in the last year and that would have been amazing to find something that cheap.
Yeah.
In Arlington, right.
I just wonder if we could put everybody's picture bigger, not read questions anymore. Is that okay?
So for me, yeah, if people are okay with that, I will stop the sharing.
Yeah,
that's fine.
Okay. Yes,
Thank
I
you.
much prefer to see people's faces. Hello again. Yes, Eric.
Something else I think people can agree on is that we'd like, I mean, it's only peripherally relevant to getting our own house in order, but I think we'd like to not be the only ones. I think that we would like adjoining towns and cities to also be working on this. Otherwise it's, I think any one town which works on it much more than their neighbors does their neighbors benefit possibly at their own expense. And so I think that having it be joint is good. As for balancing housing with the preserving the built environment, I think that's a fallacy. I don't think preserving the built environment should be a goal. I think we should be looking at what the next evolution of the built environment is. Preserving everything exactly as it is means nothing can change. Nothing can change means nothing gets better. We need to think about how things will change and come to acknowledge that change will happen.
Pam.
Hi. So going off of Eric's point about surrounding towns participating, I happen to know that both Belmont and Lexington are struggling to go ahead and figure out a way for them to get affordable housing built. I think it would be wonderful if we could have conversations regionally to help those towns that aren't quite as far along as Arlington is in understanding the amazing need for affordable housing. Just to have those kinds of discussions, I think might be very helpful in generating additional pushes in the adjoining communities for more affordable housing and more discussions, and having their town meetings actually go ahead and get things approved to move in that direction.
Thank you, Pam. Calpurnian.
Hi. I definitely agree with everything that's been said so far. I think it's great to hear that, especially about preserving the land and recognizing that we need to have some evolution. But I was going to say that I think it's also important to look at the zoning restrictions and trying to understand more about that. And being able to agree that we need to relax those zoning restrictions so that we can have more affordable housing in the neighborhoods. So I think that's also key. And then lastly, I think there needs to be a diversity of voices so that people of all incomes, all races, all backgrounds have a chance to be recognized and have their voices and concerns raised.
Thank you. Let's see, Wendy.
Yeah, I was going to say, in addition, I said this in the last breakout room, is that I feel like there's a need for some alternative housing types in town. I think that was mentioned around co-housing or congregate housing, but I think also just in different scale and size and number of units, that say 3-unit to 6-unit buildings, and just there needs to be more options for the type of housing that's built in town. And I think zoning actually discourages that, the current zoning does, but I think if I just would like to see room for more creativity in bringing different types of housing, different size units, and in a way that is compatible with what's here, not freezing everything like has to stay exactly the way it is, but without changing the character of the town. I think that different building types can be introduced. So I'd like to see some of that going forward.
Folks who haven't spoken yet, Allie, Charles, Shafak.
I work in the planning department, so I'm just here to listen.
Excellent.
But thank you for giving me an opportunity.
And you are welcome. Even planning staff are welcome to chime in. Let's see, Charles.
I came in late to the meeting, so I thought I was just going to coast.
No,
it's. I think that coming to a consensus in Arlington is actually related to coming to a regional consensus about the desirability of more development and also the desirability of more affordable housing in general. Just taking care of the general supply and demand imbalance, and but also of issues of specifically affordable housing in Arlington. So I think that encouraging a dialogue among several municipalities, I think that might be something that was productive, because affordability is a regional problem, and it's left to every municipality to deal with kind of the end effects themselves, but we can't really address it without a regional strategy.
Mark made a very good suggestion, which I probably should have done from the get-go. I will just cut and paste the discussion questions into the chat if anyone wants to reference them. But again, whether we're answering these specific questions or just talking about your own ideas for how we make consensus as a community. Eric mentions here something else he's heard a lot of, that we're moving glacially slowly. It would be nice to be somewhat less glacial. So does anyone have any ideas about that? Like how decisions get made in the town, and how people can have an influence and make the change that you want to see.
I think at that point, if I may
Yeah.
jump in, Jeff, and also something that's been brought up earlier is I think people across the board generally agree that there is a need for affordable housing, and that people will claim that they want more diversity in Arlington. But when push comes to a shove, I do think that there is an inherent tension in how much people, even people who ascribe to those values, are actually going to be willing to see that change happen in a way that impacts their lifestyle and the schools that their kids go to, the streets that they walk on, and not to mention the perception that making Arlington more affordable is going to depress property values, which I think is a concern for many, if not most, homeowners. And I think that goes to something that's hardly unique to Arlington. I think it's nationwide. In suburbs that are zoned the way Arlington are, it reflects decades, if not centuries, of active decision making by government and people in those communities to structure their worlds in a way that I think continues to this day. And I think really at the end of the day, people are going to have to decide as a community, even if it's by going to the ballot box, what's more valuable and important to them. I hope that there were a way to speak to people about their concerns and, maybe have people come in from other places and say, hey, it's not that bad. Your quality of life and the community can improve. But I think just viscerally, it's going to be a hard thing for people to wrap their heads around and to support. So I think that some decisions might have to be made without necessarily consensus of the whole community, because that might just be unattainable.
Yeah, there's a tension, I feel like, because like others have said, it is a regional problem. So actually, I mean, the body that in some ways makes the most sense to deal with the problem is the state, because they're the ones who has jurisdiction over all of these communities. And Massachusetts is actually in a somewhat unique condition where our major metro area is a huge chunk of the state population. So it's not like the state would be passing laws that applied to a bunch of other jurisdictions, like a huge percentage are, Boston metro area people. But the tension is that people don't want the state telling them what to do. And I think that is like sort of, a major issue. And it would be ideal to have communities sort of come to agreement with each other on how to cooperate to solve a problem that allows each of them to maintain the degree of local control they want while actually doing something to address the problem. But from my observations, most of the desire for local control is sort of desire to block development of things, which isn't, working to actually to solve the problem.
Pam, did you have something to add? Your hand was still up. I wasn't sure if you were
mute.
pointed.
Okay, yes, I do. I want to say, Shafiq, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, that we, as Housing Corporation of Arlington, have run into a lot of what we call NIMBY when we make our presentation to parts of the community that we want to build affordable housing there. It's like, well, come on, Pam, I support affordable housing, but do you have to build it right there, across the board? And I think that is something, I mean, I've gotten to the point where the only way to overcome that is to build it and show people that it's not going to depress their property values, it's not going to impact poorly their children's lives and safety, all of the myths that are out there about poor people coming into your community. And I think I agree with you that the only way to really address this is to get it built. And at some level, I think we are moving in that direction. Town meeting this past year has been very, very progressive in voting on a number of zoning changes, which, 4 years ago when I was there could never have happened. And there's just a real move to make things better. And so I would say getting more town meeting members elected at each of the precincts who would truly have moral compasses that support affordable housing and equity across the board is an important piece that I think needs to be looked at and generated, created.
I just add to that.
Yes,
I really appreciate that comment, Pam, because I really wanted to actually join the committee, but I wasn't aware of it until after the deadline. So I feel like that's something that we need more information about, widely spread, you know, so people, new residents, old residents, you know, et cetera, I'm sort of new here, can be aware about the different options to participate. I don't think that's really like well circulated.
Education is would be really a good piece. I agree with you.
Thank you.
Sign up for the town notices on the town website and you'll become much better informed.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed attendance at redevelopment board meetings and zoning board meetings and select board meetings definitely is not representative of the town's population. And so, yeah, I think any more education or outreach or things to get more representative members of the communities to meetings to give their input would be a huge step forward.
And Calpurnia, if you want to get on to the Facebook page of Arlington Neighbors for More Neighbors, that would be one way to get to know a lot of people that are moving in that direction.